This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Talking Life with Alicia. And Alicia, Midland therapist, Midland Wellness Center in Michigan. How are things today?
Cold and dreary.
Oh, the sun is out here. Sorry.
It was earlier and then it got dark.
Oh, okay. Well, it does get dark a little earlier.
Sadly, yeah.
So you just heard the voice of your guest today. Ken does a show with us called KX because he yaks a lot. But as a therapist, isn't that part of your job, Ken?
Well, you're not supposed to, but I break all the rules. I like to talk, so you gotta. I've had patients that say to me, "You're not like other therapists. You talk a lot."
Well, and you have good stories, and that's the one thing that I've enjoyed working with the two of you because as therapists, I have a couple close friends who are therapists, and I find sometimes when I have a conversation with them that they're trying to figure me out. And that's one nice thing about the two of you. You don't even care. So I appreciate that you're not trying to get into my head and figure out everything that's going on. But
No, I only do that when I'm being paid.
oh,
Exactly.
I appreciate that then. So Ken, tell Alicia a little bit about how you got into family therapy. I mean, what was catalyst that got you there?
It was an evolution process. I started out as far away from family therapy as you possibly can believe. I was, as a young man, I read Freud and Adler and Jung, and I was impressed by psychoanalysis. And I learned about the unconscious and all that stuff. And then when I went to Columbia, Columbia was basically an analytically oriented school. Except when I got to graduate school in the School of Social Work, they weren't. They weren't. They had their critical courses were in psychodynamics and abnormal psych, and you did defense mechanisms and learned the ego states and all of that. So it was like, okay, that's all theory. But then as I started to practice, as I worked in hospitals, worked in emergency rooms, worked in outpatient centers, inpatient centers, all over the place, psychoanalysis didn't apply. It had the basics, you could understand the defense mechanisms, but I found that it wasn't applicable, socially applicable. You had a Viennese society in the 1880s. It didn't translate to 1990, 1980 USA, especially with the issue with women, and it just didn't work. And so I was evolving in much more socially centered view of an interpsychic phenomenon within a community, within a state, within a country. And that's basically what I was taught at Columbia. And I started to see that in practice. And therefore, I got into, in the late 70s and 80s, the ego psychology thing with Rogers, and then went on with Maslow and actualization. And all of that kind of led me to a practice where the problems were just not one person. They were relationship oriented. They were husbands, they were wives, mothers, fathers, multi family homes, the old Italian home with the aunt upstairs and the uncle down the corner and everybody raising the kid. The traditional models didn't apply anymore. And I started to look at family therapists never look at an individual as a problem, they look at a system. And so I studied family systems theory. And from that led me to go to Philadelphia, to the Child Guidance Clinic with Salvador Minuchin. And so I studied with him and did an externship at the Children's Hospital there. And then got my certificate in family therapy, then got my license in family therapy, and then went on to do a 35-year practice in family therapy where I had students from Yeshiva and Columbia universities in the city that came out to study family therapy, where I would videotape sessions with a family and then have a one-way mirror where everybody could watch, and then had a post-session where you discussed why I intervened where and why I didn't in other areas. And so family therapy was like a natural evolution for me. It was a growth of myself as a person and being able to understand the problems that were being brought to me. I thought they were best encapsulated by a systems approach, notwithstanding psychiatric disorders, people that had individual psychiatric conditions, which, that's part of it. It's like alcoholism. There's a whole family system involved in that. So there's my short, quick answer.
So Alicia, before you decided to take this on as your profession, your lifelong dream, what were you doing prior to all this?
I owned a bartending school.
Yeah.
Good. I was a bartender in the village, so we got a lot in common.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I wanted to be a ballerina, like every little girl does, except I really, really wanted to do it, and I was actually pretty decent at it. And it wasn't until I had a dance injury, so I blew off school academics. Who needs math? You're going to be a prima ballerina. We don't need to know what 2 + 2 is. So I never took academics seriously. And then I got injured right before an audition for Alvin Ailey when I was 16.
Wow.
Yeah, and so then my whole life completely changed. Pardon?
He had shows all the time in the city.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
At Lincoln Center. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a New Yorker by, wanting to be. So from there, I kind of was lost till about I was like 21. So I owned my own business and then decided I wanted to make a difference in the world. So I wanted to be an eye surgeon like my father. And then that math skill that I never learned needed to help me with organic and inorganic chemistry. But I've always enjoyed psychology. I enjoy people. I really probably should have been a cultural anthropologist. However, there's no money in that, and you can sit under palm trees and contemplate the meaning of life while looking at civilizations, and that's not really conducive with my lifestyle. But psychology has always fascinated me. How the mind works, doesn't work, heal. And people are like, why are you trying to recreate the wheel? And from there on, I was like, yeah, this is kind of stupid. I can help people, and I can, grow as a person, really. And so that's how I got into the field, 22 years ago. But I've been practicing for 16 years.
So who are your influences? Who are your teachers as you learned your craft?
Gestalt really was a big thing for me. I got my PsyD from the Center for Humanistic Studies, which then became the Michigan School of Professional Psychology. So Clark Moustakis was a big, existential, and that really called to me because I can't really pigeonhole myself very well. So those were a lot. Carl Rogers, but really how people suffer, which I know doesn't sound very appealing, but it's always fascinated me what suffering looks like, and then in what our existential crises are. And so those are really the two that have that have really influenced me in my practice. I'm so jealous because I don't do family therapy a lot unless it has to do really with trauma. But Minution, when I read, I was like, oh my God, I was just like, I wanted to go run into my library and get all my Salvador books because I'm so jealous.
Yeah. Well, what was mostly impressive about him was his humanity.
Yeah.
A lot of the top leaders in the field. They're just really warm human beings. And I would be having a session and he'd be behind the mirror, and the phone would ring, you had to go up, pick on the wall, pick up the damn phone in the middle of the session. And he would say, "You can't hear anything if you're talking." Then he would say at another time, somebody would be crying in the session or everything, the phone would ring, and he said, "Reach out, grab a hand." Simple stuff, just human touch, connect was his message. He would say, "Find the pain and heal it."
But it's true.
I mean, you get messages like that in your head. They don't go away. I mean, they don't go away. It was wonderful to have that kind of humanistic quality. He didn't care of the psychodynamics or anything. He found pain. He would feel somebody's pain, and then he would teach you how to engage with them so they could give it up.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like I'm all goosebumpy. Like.
Well, and somebody who's gone to therapy many, many times in my life, I've never had a therapist who ever really reached out to me. I always had therapists that were almost very demanding that, hey, reach down into your gut and tell me what you feel. And it's like, but if I'm confused, if I'm hurting, but I don't know where that hurt's coming from, what do you want me to tell you? And I think I moved on from therapist to therapist because of that. But Ken, what you were saying is, when you were told, reach out, touch them, the human touch, sometimes that brings out the words in us, or the tears, or the laughter.
Yeah, it's a universal. My therapist, one of my therapists, was a little old Jewish lady on Fifth Avenue. She looked like Dr. Ruth. And so, I'm in there whipping and wailing. I'm giving up all my trauma, my childhood, and my mother, and all that stuff. And she said, "Wait a minute, stop. Come here." Made me get up out of the chair. This little old lady was about half my size, put her head a little above my chest, and gave me a hug. And she said, "You should have had many more of these." And you just go sit back down in your chair, like, I don't have any tears now, like that helped, something got healed with that.
Well, I think it was acknowledging the pain.
Yeah.
I mean, I have gotten, when I'll never forget this, my first therapy session out of my master's program, and I'm sitting with my very first patient, and I'm scared out of my mind. And they have like the videotapes, and this is what you're not supposed to do. And God, Alicia, you play with your hair, you talk too much with your hands. I'm like, if I sit on my hands, nothing's going to come out of my face, but okay, I got to get this grade, I got to pass. And this woman is telling me that her whole marriage is pretty much a sham. She finds out he has he's had a mistress for 20, 30 years. And I looked right at her and said, well, how does that make you feel? And this woman looked at me and she was like, how do you think it makes me feel? And I looked at her and I went, like crap? And she goes, well, that's a start. And I said, I'll never ask anyone that ever again.
Right.
And so you come in and you're sitting with the human.
Way too textbook. Yeah.
Textbook, yeah. It's like, you need this to pass the exam and then throw them out. Because it really, when you're sitting in a room, at least the way I practice, I've sat and cried with my patients. I have sat there and I've hugged them. And I'm sure that, in my practices, and some of my teachers were shaking their heads, but that's the human condition, and I have to be genuine in order to interact with my patients and expect them to be genuine with me.
I mean, the old rule about the therapist never revealing self, I threw that out the window a long time ago. It doesn't mean you get to tell your story to your patient, but I would say something like, when they were really hurting and everything, I know pain. I understand your pain. My whole mantra was, I'm not you, but if we do our work together, I will be able to feel who you are. I will be able to intuit your reactions. I should be able to walk with you as you experience things. And then we can talk about, is that the best way you want to respond, or is there another way you want to respond? But I know what your gut is. I think that's so important for people, is that they make that connection. It's not that they are similar to you, because they can be very, very different from you. What they can't be is not understand you.
Right.
So if you were to have that same patient come into your office tomorrow, let's say, Alicia,
Yes.
what would you say today when she sits there and tells you, hey, my marriage is over, it's been a sham, my husband's had a mistress all these years, and now I'm waiting for you to say something. What are you going to say?
Probably with her, I would have sat there because she needed to tell it. I was the first person that she was telling, and I would just sit there and go, oh my God. And I would, it's natural for me to go, oh my God, that's awful. And usually even just a little bit of a response, or sometimes, like, I'm not going to sit there, although silence definitely is 100% warranted. There I would have been like, oh my God, that has to be awful. And usually, if you can, for me, in my experience, when I join with my patients, so to speak, they just then emote.
Yeah. I would join and say, something like, how you holding up with all of this? You got strength for this, or is this going to knock you down?
Yeah.
How are you doing? Compare this to others in your life. Is this the worst you've ever had? Stuff like that, so that they have avenues they can compare their pain. They can look at it. They give you a sense of where they are on a 0 to 10, in terms of, I'm at my edge. Don't keep the window closed because I could go out,
Right.
So I like the fact that what you're telling your listeners is that when you're taught a certain thing in school, you're taught it for a reason, to give you a benchmark of what to do when you get out and practice. But the reality of it is you have to bring your human side into your practice if you're going to be successful.
Absolutely.
That's my belief system. I have colleagues that are analysts. And they have a certain practice. They're not warm, fuzzy people to begin with, and that works for some people. I will be honest, in my intakes, I say, I am not everyone's therapist. You're either going to love me or you're going to hate me, and I'm okay with that. And then some of them say, I love you this week and I really hate you this week. And I think for me, like, I can never say to someone like, oh, that's a great therapist. Knowing people and saying like, well, who would you recommend? Knowing their personalities, I could say, oh, that's going to go, their personalities will match. But I really think for each person and how they practice, it's their own comfort level. Because
I would always say to new patients when they first came in, listen, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, maybe not what you want to hear. And for me, it's not personal. For me, it's understanding you and telling you what you need to hear about you so that we can make some changes.
Mhm.
And you may like it, you may not like it, but whoever said this was going to be easy? Whoever said you weren't going to shed some tears in this office? Whoever said, this is real life, and the more we peel the onion, the rawer the pain can get. So, this is what you have to expect when you come to therapy. You're here to look at yourself and get an objective view that maybe you can't give yourself, that you need someone else to bounce your image off. And that's what I'll be for you. So I would give guidelines like that. And then, the hugs were important. The hand holdings were important. One thing I never did was give a tissue.
No, I've never done that either.
No, because a tissue signals stop crying.
Right.
And the idea is you're stronger than your tears. You can talk to me with your tears running down your face. Doesn't matter to me if you're crying like crazy, but you don't have to look pretty or look neat. You know, and I always objected to therapists giving patients tissues. I thought it was bad therapy.
I do too. I agree. My tissue box is front and center on my round table.
Yeah,
And
it's there for
wherever,
them. They can pick it if they want it.
exactly.
See, and I never thought of it that way. But I think it's interesting that you say it. Now that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying is your feelings are real. You don't have to stop. You know, that's what you're here for.
Well, it's
Right.
a
You
weird
get that stuff at home. Stop crying. Tell me what's wrong. You know,
Yeah.
that's what you get at home.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and on top of it, like it's a weird dynamic because you are sharing your life with somebody. And it's very personal. And I am the keeper of people's secrets. There are things that I know of people that they've never expressed in the world. And yet, I give them permission to be themselves, but I don't give advice, which everyone thinks that's what we do, and we don't. And it's about how we go about it. And I'm taking care of you, but I'm taking care of you in a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a weird, when you really sit back and think about it, it's like, yes, like little things like that. I had a patient who was a teenager, and she reminded me, I ate a healthy lunch with her every time she came to me. She's back with me now, but when she was a teenager, which they, you know, a lot of eating disorder people say, no, don't have food, don't have this. And she came on my lunch hour.
Good.
Yeah, and so eventually, you know what? She started having 4 carrots in the session.
Yeah.
But I never offered her food, and I never offered her a Diet Coke or anything like that. And actually now with the center that I own, I tell them there's coffee and there's water in my fridge. Help yourself at intake.
Yeah.
I never after that offer it.
Yeah.
It's up for grabs. This is your space.
Well, it's not about food. It's about nurturing. You know.
Right.
So we're going through this horrible time called COVID. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Michigan has gotten hit really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And New York has gotten hit just as hard. Are you seeing more patients now because of COVID, or are patients who have been coming to you more intense because of COVID?
Both.
Both?
But I'm going to reframe this because everyone has made this such a horrible thing. And yes, pandemics are horrible things. I'm choosing to look at it as Mother Nature put us in timeout, and we really needed to stop and evaluate things. And our life and our way of being has changed. For myself personally, there's been some not so great things that have come from it. And I choose to look at things differently from that aspect. But within my family relations, within my relations with my kids, and we already have a strong bond, but it's made it stronger. Friends, that kind of thing. I'm choosing really to look at the positives. Nature started to heal itself, and really about self-care and the rat race and everything. It really made me take a step back. I've had some of my patients who've come back because this really threw a monkey wrench in their life, and they needed outside, and I'm a trusted person. So that was very cool. And yeah, for some of my patients, it's been very isolating. And I'm choosing not even to say social distancing anymore. It's physical distancing because we're still having a way to be social. So I think of how I'm reframing it, but yeah, my practice has gotten very busy, which I'm grateful for, unfortunately under the circumstances, but it's brought up a lot of people's issues, most definitely.
Yeah, with people being home all the time, I mean, there's a lot more home construction projects that are beginning. Things that closets have never been this clean. Things have been foraged through and thrown out and organized, and people, we're like monkeys. We always make our area, useful to us. And home repair is really, I think, what's going on. People are home repairing their relationships, themselves. They have a lot of time being more isolated to be introspective, and all of that is fertile grounds for therapy. And now you can have therapy. People don't even have to leave their house to go have their therapy. You just dial it up on the computer and boom, there you are. So I think it's made it a lot easier, and I think people are utilizing it a lot more. So I think the conditions out there are making us healthier in some way.
Well, and they say that they expect from COVID there are going to be more marriages ending. But I find it interesting that my husband and I obviously are spending more time in our house together than we did before. But one of the things I think that we found personally was to find separate space, even though we're in the same place all day long, and to give ourselves permission to do that. But yet I know of other people who are saying, they can't wait till the pandemic is gone because they need to go on a vacation away from their spouse. And it's like, what about taking that vacation in your home?
I mean, people in traditional homes where they have a living room, dining room, and bedroom, they're in trouble because the shared space is one room. We're lucky here. My partner and I, we have an office and a living room and a dining room. So there's 3 different rooms that we can take our computer with. If she's got a Skype with somebody and I have a Zoom with somebody, we can both be in different rooms and have our professional life and have our separate personal life, our own phone calls, etc., just like we would when we lived separately. So you can work it out spatially if you're lucky enough to have enough rooms to be able to do it.
Well, you can always go take a walk outside. And that's what I did before today's show. I just, needed it. I didn't want to talk to my husband, didn't want to talk to my son. And I knew why I didn't. I was in overload. And so I went outside for a walk. So when somebody comes to you and is telling you they're in overload, like I was, and in the past, I wouldn't have thought about going for a walk. That would have been too strenuous for me. What are some of you don't tell people what to do, but you guide people, correct?
Yeah. I would ask them what they have done previously. Did you have a gym? Did you have a car you went for a ride in? Did you have a bicycle? Did you have a punching bag? Did you have a yoga mat? Did you meditate, or did you, go full out fury? How did you get rid of it? I would ask.
Same here. What worked for you and what didn't work for you? What you liked, what you didn't like.
And are you doing it now? And if not, why?
And that's something that we don't ask ourselves. We don't stop and, try to analyze, why am I feeling this way? Or what could I do to make it better? And I think part of doing these podcasts.
One is intellectual and the other one is action. The why doesn't really matter so much unless you're a real analytical person and you have an intellectual curiosity about why you're so fucked up. It's much easier to say, what's the road out of this?
Okay.
Focus on the road out of it. So I never really looked so much at the whys. I thought that was psychoanalysis. They do the whys. I'm more of a road repair guy. I'm
Absolutely.
out there filling the potholes.
Yeah, how'd we get here? Because the why my dad didn't hold me, yeah, it has some weight to it, but why you're sitting on my couch crying right now because you're mad? That's fact. And I can't, why you're mad? You're mad. And honestly, I think a lot of people don't really care of the why, to be honest. They want it to go away. We're like emotional fire people. We go into the fire and most people are like, "Whoa, there's a fire, run."
Yeah. I never, as you brought that up, Alicia, I was a person that never really focused a lot on anger. I always thought it was an immediate self-protective response. I would rather go for the hurt.
Yeah.
The hurt, the hurt is where before the anger came out. You know, somebody hurt you. Somebody did something to you. The world did something to you. You did something to you. Somebody did something to you, and you hurt. What hurt is that? What got hurt? And there you find pain, and that's a Minuchin tool. You know, find the pain.
So a lot of what the two of you do, and correct me if I'm wrong, um, don't personal coaches do similar type work with individuals?
I don't know. I don't know about personal coaches. I've never understood what they do.
Okay, because
I mean, I know people that coach in baseball. I know people that coach for jobs. I know people that coach for, you know, skill learning and other stuff, but I don't know about coaching for therapy.
okay, well, I'm referring to somebody that I've worked with in the past who's a personal coach, and what she does is very similar to what you're doing, although you don't go to her, you know, crying necessarily or realizing that you have pain. You know, you want to make some changes. You're really not sure exactly what changes you want to make, but you know that you're just not in the right place right now. And some of the things that she will go through is, what are some of the things that have worked for you before?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so that's why I was wondering if it was similar.
No, not even in the same realm, because you're having someone point out to you, well, this is what you're doing, and this is what you need to do to change it. And we're talking about the human condition, and it's feelings, it's thoughts, it's the whole gestalt, so to speak. And you're talking about like a skill set.
Got it.
At least that's what I'm experiencing.
Well,
What you're saying.
and I believe that's true. And that's why I was, because some of the things that you're talking about sound similar, but you go much deeper.
Yeah. I wouldn't say there's one way out of anybody's problem. There's probably multiple paths. And I would always say, let's find your paths. If you did this, what do you think would happen? If you did that, let's look at where you are now and the choices that are in front of you, and let's, you know, take them to their natural conclusion. A lot of times as they get into it, they say, ooh, I don't want this road.
Right.
Good. Self-discovery, choice, decision. Boom. Okay, next road.
Right. And it's painful. I have patients that we've talked about all the different avenues, and I always say I'm walking on a journey with you.
Right.
And they're going like, you know what, I'm going to the right, I'm going to the right, and I'm going in my head, we've been down this road, but okay, we'll go down it another week. Oh, you're getting the same reaction. Why are you keep going to something that is not, what did I say? Oh, last week I said to my patient, you keep going to a bowl for milk. I'll watch you go through going to the bowl for milk, but I'm telling you right now, you're still not going to get milk from the bowl. And 2 weeks into it, she's still going down that path. And I'm sitting here going like, okay. And I will sit there and if she has to do it 15 million times after talking to her and going, well, what about this avenue? This is your goal. You're telling me this is your goal. Here are all your possibilities. Nope, she wants to go to the bowl. And so we'll keep going to the bowl and she will keep hurting herself. And she's starting to realize like, oh, I'm doing it again, which is great. That's the self-actualization. Hey, this is the results. But I don't think life coaches do that.
No,
they don't care. They're saying, no, you do this. And if you don't do this, I'm still collecting my, $100. And I'm going to tell you next week to keep going to the left, and you need to go to the left. Well, maybe you need to go to the right 15 times for you to figure out, oh, you don't get milk from a bull. I need to find the cow.
Got it. Absolutely. So
I would talk about in a scenario like that, my reframe would be an experimental Pavlov box with a mouse and 2 spigots. And they keep tapping one spigot and finally some water comes out. And so they keep going back to that spigot because it has water. But then the other one, no matter how many times they tap it, no water comes out. How long will it take the mouse to figure out that there's no water in that spout?
Interesting. Well, some of us are slow learners, so hey.
But I mean, there's the mantra. I mean, you give them the formula. I mean, the cruel way would be to say, listen, things that don't work keep getting repeated by certain people. And most of those people are crazy because they keep doing the same thing, although they don't get the result. So who keeps repeating something that doesn't work? Crazy people. So crazy
Which
person.
is why we have a business.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, a lot of times we keep repeating what we do over and over again because it's something that was ingrained in us. Keep doing this.
Yeah.
Oh, it's familiar. It's comforting. Yeah. You know the outcome. That's why I have a patient who's been married 4 times to it's the same woman, different name. It's the same, you know why? Because everything is all grand and roses, and then, but.
Well, you got a teenager there.
Exactly. One, I got a teenager. And then the other piece to it is he's doing the same things. Oh, this time it's different. No, it's not. No, this time no, it's not. You're looking to fix it at the same time. It's like, but I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's
the really first 6 months of a relationship where people project their needs onto somebody else and it's all magical and the sex is hot and crazy and everybody's, oh my God, this is it, I found it. And then all of a sudden when your projections stop and you start seeing who the real person is that you're projecting onto, all of a sudden there's a lessening of intensity and they start to see them. Oh, you've changed, they'll say. No, they haven't changed. What happened is that you've lost your foggy glasses. You're starting to see clearer now. And so that's a pattern. You'll repeat that pattern until you learn that you're really looking for yourself in someone else rather than looking for someone else. And that's a hard lesson. But that's the one I taught a lot, that, you really need to see that it's not you out there. You're here. Somebody different is out there. Different opinion, conflict, negotiation, compromise. Those are the real assets of a relationship.
So since you're both therapists, okay, and you work with people day in and day out and you help them through their issues, who helps you through your issues?
I got a whole bag load of people.
Well, that's what you need, right?
Oh yeah. I've been in therapy maybe 5 times in my life, but the most important people, because my issue with never having a father was always I found older men who guided me. Mm-hmm. And so I have a bevy of men who, in tough parts of my life, I could pick up a phone and say, you got to hear me out. And I would talk and they would listen. And those are your supervisors. Those are the people and a lot of them were also in the field, so they understood. And, I didn't need to be shrunk. I needed to be helped.
Mine are 2 people in my life who inherently know who I am and can call me on my bullshit. And one of them is my big sister from boarding school who I can pick up the phone. We do this constantly. Her son dies laughing at us because we're like 2 little teenagers, but I can call her at any time and been like, today he sucked. Everything I did wrong in therapy, everything, the kids, you name it. And I can vent and I can be me and I don't have to she never says, well, you're the therapist. Yeah. She never, I'm Alicia to her. I'm actually Allie to her because that was my nickname. And it's nice because it's genuine. I know she cares. I know that she would give her limb for me. And there's no judgment there. And I've been in therapy as well. I know what my issues are, but here's the thing, not everything is an issue. You know, I mean, that's the thing. You can have a bad day, and it be okay. So I have people in my life. I have somebody that he gets me, he knows, and who also called me on my bullshit.
I am
So
so lucky. I have a male friend that we bonded when we were 10. And we hung out together. We grew up together as teenagers. He was 1 year older than me. And my first ride in the car was with him, you know. And he's 80 years old now, and I'm going to be 79. And we've been friends for almost 68 years.
Wow.
You call him up and you start to say anything, he's got it itemized, referenced, and historically accurate observation, you know, where it's an incredible, we finish one another's sentences. He knows what I'm thinking. He said, "No, I know what you're thinking, but that's wrong. You're putting this guy. That guy wasn't there. This is the guy who was there." And he was right. You know, I mean, so when you know somebody who knows you that well, what a resource.
yeah.
You know, when you say, "Listen, here I am. Am I on or not?" You know, and
Right.
you sound pretty good. You sound all right. You know, nah, well, you're a little bit, you know, blah blah blah. And I love that. I love that. I can do that for him. I can just hear in his tone.
I was gonna say,
Tell a story. I can tell which way this story is going to go because he can tell the same. Because he's 80, he keeps forgetting he tells the same stories, but he tells them with different inflection and different mood and different feeling. You know, and so you can gauge his day by how he tells the story.
Well,
It's like geriatric psychiatry. You know, I met you yesterday, but I don't know you today. Oh yeah, I was. You know.
well, I've shared this story before. Like I said, I've known Alicia's mom, most of my life. And, we lost contact with each other for quite a while. There I was in Detroit. My mother was dying and we reconnected. And when we met at Starbucks, it was like we had just said goodbye to each other 5 minutes ago and we bumped into each other again. It's people like that, like I don't think I've really talked to your mom in the last couple of years. Why? No real reason. They've been traveling and they've been busy, and I follow her on Facebook, but I know that that's a connection that if I picked up the phone and just said, "Hey Blanche," she probably would know what I was thinking. And I have a couple of friends like that as well. And I'm like that in return to them. So I'm so glad that you both said that, because there are going to be people listening thinking, "Oh, do I need to go see a therapist?" That's something we all have to decide for ourselves if therapy is needed. We all need a friend.
I was in practice for 50 years. I never advertised. The only way I ever got clients was my clients sent me clients. Mm-hmm. And so people I treated 40 years ago, I've seen their son, and now I'm seeing his grandson, And so that's within the family. I know this one. Go see Ken. I'm this fixture on the wall that they take off every 10 years. Go talk to, But those kind of connections, familial connections, that's the source of our work. That makes me feel so good when I know that I helped somebody 30 years ago and they still say, "Ken, boy, what you put me on the right path." And I'm telling you, I'm so thankful. Look at me today. I'm a successful man, and I could have gone the other way. And somebody tells you something like that, it makes all the study and all the work and everything that you do worth it.
Absolutely.
It's really helping the human condition.
So Alicia, you were agreeing with what Kim was saying there. I saw that big, huge smile on your face.
Because I have a family that I see individually, and I laugh when people say that, because there's a saying when things get really crappy in their household of, "Do we have to call Alicia?" And then everyone snaps too. And even the dog, the dog, I'm in love with their dog, but you say, "Do I have to call Alicia?" And he even, sits there pretty. So it's kind of funny, but that is probably one of the best, like when I hear from people like, oh, you've changed my life. And I always say, no, you did the work. And then I get, oh, you know, so-and-so told me to call you. They trust you. I won't see anyone but you. Do you have a wait list? Do you have this? Because you are the person to go see. And it's humbling. And at the same time, it's like, oh, damn, I really did make a difference in this person's life. And I'm making a difference in other people's lives too. Which is nice to know, because sometimes after therapy, we never see people again and we don't know what the outcome of it was.
Right. I used to love to get what I call dead-end referrals. You know, I was somewhat of a specialist because I've been at it for so long that I had a way of getting to the problem quicker than other people get to it. You know, I have a way of just seeing things that it's a little bit different. And the dead-end therapy was that people who went to a therapist and then they found out that they knew more about themselves or they knew more about the situation than the therapist did, and they lost trust because the therapist tried to cure or fix at the wrong time and exposed their lack of knowledge, and all of a sudden that kills therapy.
Right.
If you've given up your expertise chair, then you don't deserve any money. You don't deserve anything because you're not earning what you do. And so people would come to a dead end with therapy, and then they would knock around. And then I had the reputation of taking dead end cases where we would start over and reopen up the road. And they would look at me and they'd say, well, Mervyn never did that. You know, I said, well, that's why you're here.
It's funny you should say that, because my son, being on the autism spectrum, had been in therapy almost his whole childhood life. And he went away to college and he promised to go to therapy and he didn't. And then he came home one day and he said, I think I'm ready for therapy. And we said, but you've been going. He said, no, you know, they don't know what they're talking about. And he used to outsmart the therapist when he was young. You know, they would tell him what to do. He'd say yes. He'd get in the car and say he wouldn't do it. But he finally found this one therapist who called him on his bullshit. And that was the day that he really learned how to live with his autism. It was no longer a reason, an excuse, or anything else. And
Label.
I found it quite remarkable that here we had spent God knows how much money on numerous doctors throughout the years, okay? And we knew he wasn't getting anything out of it, but we just kept hoping and praying. And so we'd switch from one to another. But the two of you have taught me this today, that once your personalities click, you're more open to revealing what's inside and hurting, and you're willing to listen to the opportunity to get better.
Therapy is understanding and change. 2 words.
Right.
Understanding and change. Once you understand, you are able to change. And the excuses go out the window. I mean, a lot of people come in. We used to put the word, they were help rejecting complainers. You guys went away. Where'd you go?
I'm here.
We're here.
You're frozen.
Yeah, you just froze. Keep talking.
So it would be the help rejecting complainer. People would come in and say, oh, my life sucks. I have this and that. What should I do? You know, and if you took that bait and told them what they could do, then they would, you know, not do it and then complain. So, you know, there's the vicious circle of being able, you have to at some point say to somebody, you know, you're not willing to change. I can't help you.
Right.
Well, I'm so glad we were able to bring the two
There you are.
together. Oh, there you go. And for your listeners to understand that, you know, therapy can get us through a lot. And like I said in the beginning, I've been to a number of therapists. Some I felt I clicked with, and obviously I got something out of it. Others I didn't feel like I was clicking with them, and walked away, not blaming them, but just blaming the issues, okay? But the reality of it is, once I realized that I wanted to make changes,
Right.
it worked out with the therapist. So,
Well, Karen, you know my belief that any one conversation has the potential to change your life.
Absolutely.
As
absolutely.
long as you are open, doesn't matter where it comes from. Could be some old guy on a bench in the middle of Missouri on a general store, and he could tell you his philosophy, and it could affect the rest of your life. Or it could be somebody who is, like Sachidananda on a big pillow and making the room go up 10 degrees. Stuff like that. Any one event at any one time can have a profound influence on you if you're willing to be open and listen. I mean, people want to open doors for you all the time. Are you fighting to keep your door shut, or are you ready to change and look at something a different way? And that's what I tried to sell as a therapist, was that be prepared to be ready to change and know it when you see it.
And want it. I mean, there's a part we bring up about, and Karen, you do this all the time, when we say about like, oh, there's a precipitating problem. There are people who just want to go to therapy to work on themselves, to be the best person that they want to be. Yeah. And those are fun as well. Like I listen, if I'm not entertained and amused in therapy and it's boring for me, then it's got to be boring for them, because I get excited when I learn something new about myself. And I want the same for my patients. I want them to be entertained. I want them to be active participants and involved in their life. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, what am I? I'm just a wall. Yay. Like that's an entertaining wall, but a wall. It's a three-ring circus in my head. So I think that with them, like, it doesn't have to be COVID. It doesn't have to be a trauma. It could be, I woke up one day, the sun came out. I don't like this about myself. I want to be better. I want to do this different. And, I want to figure something out, or I want to be different in how I am in the world. That to me is exciting. So therapy, it's a spectrum. Nothing has to be necessarily labeled wrong. It's just not working for you anymore. Yeah. And so they're just different avenues.
And I appreciate you saying that, because obviously that's really what happened for my son. When he woke up one day and realized this is not working, how can I make it work? Yeah. And he was open, like you said, Ken.
That's day one.
Yep. So I'm hoping that those who are listening are getting the feel that, you know what, we all need a little help in our lives. We don't go through life. We don't have to go through life alone. Let me put it that way.
We're not meant to. It's the human condition. That's what sets us off from difference. We're all connected. We're all in relation with one another, within ourselves and with others. So to be isolated.
Absolutely. I love that idea that when somebody finally got to that day, where they said, wow, I can see myself being different. There's a different me in there. This is my mother talking, or this is my father talking, or this is the way they taught me to be, and I've always gone along with it. But I see I don't have to do that anymore. And I would be jumping up and down saying, yay, yay, you've arrived, you've opened your door. There's a lot inside of who you are, and let's go discover it.
Well, Ken, you just told me a story. That's not fair. Well, I love having the two of you together. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, enjoyed meeting you, Alicia. Very nice.
So nice meeting you, Ken. You're like my spirit animal.
Good.
Well, now the two of you know each other, so there's no reason why you can't connect. And again, we'll be back in 2 weeks with Talking Life with Alicia. Have a great day, everybody.
Okay. Bye, all.
Bye.